The day my family's business went under, my parents packed us up and moved us back to Boston. My childhood crush, the one I hadn't seen in years, was now apparently the golden boy of the city's elite. The heir to a corporate empire. Rumor had it he was cold, ruthless, and had zero patience for anyone trying to latch onto him, wanting to avoid any trouble. The instant I caught that lazy, dismissive gaze of his, I faked a memory lapse and hightailed it out of there. But life, as it always does, had other plans. Just hours later, at a family gathering, he scooped me up and pinned me between his thighs. My toes curled with panic. He let out a low chuckle, his voice a deep, husky sound that teased. "Sweetheart, you used to cling to me like glue. Now you're pretending you don't know me. Hear the full story on Audio Obsession." I was 15 when I left Boston. My parents had expanded their business to a few coastal cities, so we all relocated to Portland, Maine. Across the manicured lawn of our new suburban house lived a boy who always had this defiant, devil-may-care look on his face. His parents were so busy chasing success, they seemed to forget he even existed, leaving him to wander that sprawling mansion in solitude. He was 2 years older than me. The other kids in the neighborhood, if they saw him, would freeze up. He was the undisputed king of the rich kids' enclave, arrogant and wild. Yet, for some reason, even though we were neighbors, he never gave me that cold shoulder he showed everyone else. Every time he called out to me, his voice would magically drop a few octaves, turning strangely gentle. Back then, I'd hit puberty early and started filling out faster than the other girls. The boys and girls in our wealthy neighborhood, fueled by jealousy, ganged up to ostracize me. Whenever I walked by, I'd be pelted with whispers and insults, like so much trash flying at my head. Being naturally quiet, I chose to bury my head in the sand. I'd clutch my backpack straps tight, speed walk home, forcing myself to look like I didn't care, just to escape the verbal abuse. But sometimes, the sheer loneliness would get to me. My knuckles would turn white from gripping my bag so hard, and my eyes would well up, tears streaming down my face uncontrollably. I'd quickly wipe them away, desperate to hide my pathetic state. Just then, he'd appear, leaning against the gate of his house, idly spinning a silver Zippo lighter. His deep, dark eyes would silently watch me, not a hint of mockery or accusation in them, as if he understood without a word. The very next morning, I overheard whispers about the spoiled brats from the neighborhood getting a harsh lesson from some mysterious force. I didn't know who my anonymous hero was, but hearing about their defeat, I ate an extra 2 bowls of rice for lunch that day. As the sun began to set, I stood nervously on the sidewalk, clutching a homemade tiramisu cake. Peering towards his house, the door creaked open, revealing a single dim lamp casting a lonely glow from within the grand estate. It was his birthday, but his parents were, as usual, away on business. He stood in the doorway, his handsome face devoid of emotion, but his tall frame subtly blocked my view, keeping me from seeing the mess inside. There were red marks around his eyes and the tip of his nose, a stark contrast to his otherwise perfect features. He cleared his throat, an unusual nervousness in his voice. "What can I do for you?" I tilted my head up, my voice barely a whisper. "Caleb, my mom said, it's your birthday. I made you a tiramisu." The words were almost lost to the wind. He lowered his gaze, watching me silently. He said nothing, but a swirling mist seemed to gather in his eyes. It was the first time I'd ever attempted anything in the kitchen, and the cake looked wobbly. Frankly, it was a culinary disaster. I fidgeted, chastising myself for being so forward, convinced a rich kid like him would surely scoff at my lopsided creation. Just as I was about to grab the cake and flee, he reached out, took it, and said in a low voice, "Thank you." As I watched him blow out the candles and make a wish, the flickering flame cast sharp shadows on his face. He suddenly opened his eyes. Looking straight into mine, he asked, with surprising seriousness, "Will I get to eat your cake again next year?" His voice, usually so distant, held an intense, expectant tone. I was stunned. My mouth moved before my brain could catch up. I puffed out my chest. Easy, of course. Caleb, if you like it, I'll make you a cake every year. He just gave a slight nod, saying nothing more. But I didn't see his hands clenching into fists at his sides, hidden from my view. Who could have predicted the twists of fate? The day of our parting arrived like a whirlwind, as movers loaded boxes into a truck. Caleb stood leaning against his balcony railing, his quiet gaze following me. When our eyes met, I felt a pang of guilt. I hesitated, biting my lip, unsure if I should even shout a goodbye. In the end, I just shyly raised my hand, waving it a little. Caleb, I'm leaving, I managed to whisper. His hands gripped the railing tighter, as if he'd heard me. He looked up slightly, a cold, mocking smile playing on his lips. His perfect face unreadable. His voice, faint in the wind, was distant, but his dark eyes held a terrifying stubbornness. Goodbye. I used to think that if my family hadn't gone bankrupt, I'd never have set foot back in Boston. I'm incredibly sensitive to heat, and Boston summers are always more brutal than anywhere else. But my naive father got conned by a so-called business partner into investing in a bogus project. The aftermath: our family company was gone, swallowed whole by others. All our houses and cars in Portland were saddled with debt, with no other options. My parents reluctantly packed our bags and moved us back to our old hometown, Boston, hoping to start over. 7 years flew by in a blink. The old neighborhood still had its charm, but most of the wealthy families had moved to newer, more exclusive developments. Over those 7 years, fortunes were made, and the undisputed king of Boston's corporate world was none other than the Sterling Group. It was a titan of industry, a level of power my family, even at our peak, could only dream of. As I pulled my suitcase past our old house, I noticed the lights on the second floor were still on. Huh, my mom said, surprised. Someone's still living there. I thought the Sterlings had so much money. They'd have sold that old place. My dad's eyes lit up with a business-minded spark. He decided he'd swing by with some of that prime beef jerky we brought from Maine to greet the neighbors. If the Sterling Group still remembered the old days, our fresh start in Boston would be a lot smoother. That evening, at dinner, my dad walked in beaming, like a kid on Christmas morning. Just washed my hands, he announced, bursting with news. I knocked on their door. And guess who answered? It's young Sterling. That Sterling heir. Spoiled rotten by his dad. No doubt. He's only in his early 20s. But the presence, the aura he gives off, even made me feel a little intimidated. My mom wrung her hands nervously. How did it go? Did they brush us off? Do we still have a chance to get close to them? So many people are lining up to butter up Sterling these days. My dad chuckled, his eyes shining. It couldn't have gone better. Honey, I mentioned wanting to stay in touch. And Sterling, though he looked ice cold and spoke so casually, accepted my jerky. He's got a good palate. That one. My mom clapped her hands together. Thank goodness. The ancestors are smiling on us. I remembered when I was little. I used to follow that boy around constantly. He acted like he didn't care about anyone. Yet he was incredibly patient with little Gabby. Back then, our families even joked about betrothing us. My dad beamed, turning to me. Exactly. Gabby, from now on, find excuses to be around Sterling more. That childhood friendship must still mean something to him. When the time is right, you can discreetly ask him to look out for us. I nearly choked on my chicken, my body stiffening like a statue at the mention of his name. Caleb Sterling. The brooding neighbor from my memories was now a top-tier, high society icon. Brilliant and ruthlessly pragmatic. Even miles away in Portland, I'd heard countless stories about his power plays. As the head of Sterling Group, Caleb Sterling was now 1,000 times more formidable, proud, and merciless. The rumors said he detested anyone pretending to be family just to get a piece of the pie. Back then, I'd fled without a proper goodbye. Him not blacklisting me was a miracle. How could I possibly dare to approach him now? 7 years of silence. That childhood bond had probably rotted away to nothing. I froze, my gaze fixed on my plate, shoveling food in, playing the part of the oblivious ostrich. Knowing how Sterling hated clingy people, I spent my first week back in Boston practically in lockdown, barely leaving the house. But with my family desperate to rebuild, certain business social events were unavoidable. My parents dragged me to a charity auction gala on a luxury yacht. I was certain someone as high caliber as Caleb Sterling would scoff at such a common affair. But fate, as it often does, had other ideas. I ran into him right there, on deck. Amidst the glittering party, the powerful CEOs, who usually carried themselves with such arrogance, were now meekly bowing and smiling obsequiously around Caleb Sterling. They were old enough to be his parents, yet their faces were etched with desperate attempts to please him. Standing at the center of the throng, Caleb Sterling was a commanding presence in his impeccably tailored suit. He casually twirled a glass of red wine, an air of languid indifference about him, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. That same arrogant spirit from years ago was still there. But now his brow and his eyes held a new level of ruthlessness and unfathomable depth. A buzz rippled through the crowd around me. Oh my God, it's Caleb Sterling. Is he gracing us with his presence tonight? Who managed to pull strings to get the legend himself here? This is my lucky break. Seeing the Sterling heir. Someone I only dreamed of meeting. I have to seize this chance. Someone this influential. A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I have to go for it. Maybe I'll catch Sterling's eye and we'll get a lifeline from Sterling Group. Despite the excited chatter, no one dared to step forward. Caleb Sterling was famously aloof. A mobile freezer. Only a handful of the most powerful moguls tonight had the standing to offer him even a polite smile. I retreated to the furthest corner of the dessert bar, trying to melt into the wallpaper. I knew it was probably futile. 7 years had passed. I'd changed. He probably wouldn't even recognize the weepy girl from his past. Reassured, I began to tackle the macaron tower, figuring I couldn't attend a party starving. As I took a bite of a cake, a fiery gaze pierced through the crowd, fixing directly on the back of my neck. Accustomed to my quiet, demure mask, I flinched when I looked up and met those lazy, sharp eyes. My heart skipped a beat. Was Caleb Sterling looking at me? Oh no. In my panic, I quickly lowered my gaze, turning my back and pretending to be engrossed in a wall painting, muttering to myself, he's probably looking at the vase behind me. I thought, there's no way he'd recognize me that quickly. I spent the rest of the party playing a game of hide and seek. Whenever he appeared on the bow, I'd slip away to the stern. Near the end of the evening, Caleb Sterling, his face as cold as ice, abruptly left. The crowd buzzed, speculating wildly about who had managed to anger him so much that even the most important executives were sweating through their undershirts. With the main attraction gone, the party dissolved early. Stepping off the yacht, I let out a sigh of relief. My stiletto heel had broken earlier, leaving my ankle throbbing. I'd borrowed a pair of oversized, fluffy slippers from a cleaning lady and was shuffling along the dock, but under the pale yellow glow of the streetlights in the parking lot, a familiar silhouette brought my slippers to a screeching halt. It was Caleb Sterling, broad shoulders like the Pacific, a lean waist, and long, endless legs. He leaned casually against the hood of a sleek black Mercedes. His long fingers held a still-burning cigarette, the other idly flicking open and shut his silver Zippo, the rhythmic clicks filling the air. Seeing me shuffling towards him, his expression didn't change. He casually stubbed out his cigarette, his gaze drifting down to my mismatched, fluffy slippers. There was no turning back. I gritted my teeth and shuffled towards him. The toes I'd painted a bright red last week were now exposed, clashing wildly with my elegant evening gown and my timid demeanor. I awkwardly tucked my feet back. Caleb Sterling finally lifted his indifferent gaze to my face. Our eyes met. He raised an eyebrow, a chilling calm descending. Long time no see. Gabby, hearing my name, I snapped to attention, standing as stiff as a statue. Remembering his aversion to hangers-on, I bit my lip. Deciding to feign amnesia to avoid trouble, I took a step back, my eyes wide with feigned innocence. I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling. I think you have the wrong person. Have we met before? Caleb Sterling's eyes narrowed as he let out a low, throaty chuckle, his voice laced with a sharp, hidden amusement. His dark, fathomless eyes locked onto mine. Sweetheart, you used to stick to me like glue. Now that you're grown up, you like pretending you don't know me, caught red-handed. My palms began to sweat. My fake amnesia had spectacularly failed. Clutching my dress, I stammered, my voice trembling as I broke the awkward silence. Caleb. Hi, my hesitant greeting seemed to please the young magnate. A glint of wicked amusement appeared in his cool eyes. Mom and Dad set me up tonight, playing matchmaker with some new influential people. So I was stuffed into this tight, off-the-shoulder black mermaid gown. My hair was pulled back high, showcasing my swan-like neck and collarbones. With this stunning transformation, I'd already caught the eye of quite a few young men on the yacht. I looked a million miles away from the chubby girl with pigtails back then, standing before Caleb Sterling. I felt the air grow thin. His gaze was intense, possessive, like a hunter admiring his prey, or a collector appraising a precious treasure. My heart pounded in alarm. I quickly looked down, counting imaginary ants on the floor. Caleb Sterling was too famous in Boston, even if I'd stayed home with my eyes and ears shut. Legends of him still filled the air. The whispers in the streets claimed Sterling Group's rise to power was solely thanks to Caleb Sterling's ruthless ambition. He'd overthrown his parents' conservative regime, acting decisively and swiftly, showing no one any deference. Ruthless, autocratic, cold-blooded. He'd surgically removed the branches of power, consolidating all authority. In just 3 years, Sterling Group transformed from an old lion into a rampaging dragon. His parents, though bearing the title of chairman, were effectively sidelined. He was the sole ruler now. Over the years, countless beautiful women who dreamed of sleeping with the heir were unceremoniously tossed out, their fates often tragic. Hearing about his exploits, I silently offered a prayer of thanks. The fact that my father had the audacity to bring jerky to his house and wasn't thrown out was nothing short of a miracle. A boss like him could easily pull my family out of the mud. But even with the title of childhood sweethearts, I still wanted to plaster a danger, keep out sign on his forehead. But Caleb Sterling continued to stare at me, seeing my silence. He paused, a complex emotion flashing in his eyes so quickly. I thought I'd imagined it. His Adam's apple bobbed. His gaze suddenly became intensely serious. Yet his voice was clear, unclouded by any impurities. Gabby. I looked up in confusion. Yes, Caleb Sterling's lips curved into a perfect, subtle smile. His voice was light, as if he were just commenting on the weather. You've grown up so much. Are you old enough to date yet? It was a casual question, spoken in a steady tone. But his eyes, deep as an autumn lake, sent a flush all the way to my cheeks. Why are you blushing like that? Gabby, you're so useless. What if he got the wrong idea? After all, I did say I wanted to marry him when we were kids, terrified of my panic being exposed. I decided the best defense was a good offense. I bolted, my fluffy slippers flapping as I ran. In my haste, I accidentally glanced back and saw his expression darken. A flicker of loss in his eyes. Disappointment. Did the Sterling heir actually feel disappointed in me? I shook my head frantically. Still running? Trying to quash the absurd thought. I must have imagined it. The parking lot lights were faulty. This was first class. And I was just a nobody. The more I tried to escape, the more fate seemed to push me back into his orbit. We're saved. The Hayes family has a chance to survive. My dad's triumphant shout echoed as he burst through the door, his face radiant after days of fruitless begging and bribery. My mom rushed to his side. What is it? Did you pluck a star from the sky? My dad grinned from ear to ear. Sterling Group. They're incredibly interested in our tech project. They're sending a team to survey our company tomorrow. I froze. Mid-bite of my chicken leg. Sterling Group. This colossal empire was interested in our tiny, insignificant project. My mom echoed my thoughts. Are you sure you weren't tricked? We have nothing Sterling would want? You must have misheard the company name. My dad's eyes gleamed with pride. Misheard. How could I? Caleb Sterling himself called me. He even kindly asked about Gabby, saying it's been a while and asked how she's doing. My heart leaped in my chest. It's been a while. We met last night. Oh no. Maybe he called to check up on me? Did he call because I ran away? After asking only 3 questions? He practically sprinted away. That's not very dignified. I put down my chicken leg. Feigning. Nonchalance. Why would he mention me? How did you answer? Dad. My father ruffled my hair, beaming with pride. Of course. I boasted about my daughter. This project was your passion, even though you're shy. You spent 7 years in Portland buried in your studies, developing this core technology, writing the algorithms yourself, hoping to help your father rebuild the company. I saw how much it meant to you, so I put everything into it. Now Sterling Group is interested. Young Sterling even praised your talent. I picked up my rice bowl, a smile creeping onto my lips. If I had a tail, it would be wagging like a ceiling fan right now. Heh! The dreaded Caleb Sterling, who apparently yells at his employees like a banshee, actually praised my talent. But my dad's next words delivered a crushing blow. Lausia, he said, stroking his beard with a smile. Who says Caleb Sterling is a demon? I think he's quite charming. Just a bit. I've decided. This project is your passion. Gabby, so, for this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, you'll represent the company and lead the project. He clapped me on the shoulder. He's already asked for your help. And guess what? Sterling agreed to personally mentor you. How amazing is that? Personally mentor me, I felt a shattering sound echo in my soul. Everyone knew working under Caleb Sterling required nerves of steel. Top executives were reportedly reduced to tears and chased out of his office daily. I'd practically walked myself into a trap. My dad, still lost in his billionaire fantasy, rambled on. This is a huge win. With the Sterling Group backing us, we'll definitely reclaim our glory. I told you. Those beef jerky sticks from Portland were a good omen. He must have been touched by the taste of home. He turned to me. Gabby, you need to stick close to him and learn his secrets. He's the golden boy of Boston now. Learn even 10% of his skill, and your future will be golden. That night, I tossed and turned, feeling like a worm on a hook. Visions of me messing up a report. Caleb Sterling throwing the files in my face and yelling, "Get out!" played in my head. I was racked with regret. If only I'd stayed and negotiated with him a bit longer last night. I wouldn't be having these memories flood back now. Back then, I was a total pest, following Caleb Sterling around, simply because he was so handsome. I'd trail behind him, calling out, Mr. Sterling, Mr. Sterling, asking all sorts of questions, until Caleb Sterling's face would turn as black as a thundercloud. His brow furrowed in irritation. Truth be told, he hated my persistent presence back then. He hated anyone touching him. The teenage Caleb Sterling wasn't as stable or terrifying as he was now. His eyes then were filled with a world-weary hatred. Like a wounded animal. I didn't realize he had psychological issues back then. When I overheard the neighborhood kids secretly calling him a mad dog, a chained dog, but with a vicious bite. I cried heartbrokenly beside him, because I could see the shattered desperation in his eyes. He craved love but recoiled from any light that touched him. Whenever he saw me sobbing, Caleb Sterling would let out a long sigh. He'd squat down, his dark eyes filled with sorrow, awkwardly wipe my tears, and softly say, "Stop crying. Someone like me isn't worth it." From that moment on, I pulled out all the stops to be kind to him. I patiently chipped away at his defenses until he began to open his inner world, welcoming the world, and welcoming me. But just as I promised to stay by his side, I left without a word. That year, he stood on his balcony watching the moving truck disappear, his eyes turning to a 1,000-year-old block of ice, as if mocking himself. See, in the end, everyone leaves you. In that moment, the darkness in his eyes terrified me. Seeing my fear, Caleb Sterling's face flickered with panic and regret. He wanted to say something, but I was too cowardly. I couldn't even muster a proper goodbye. I just ran, heading straight out of Boston. Afterward, we could have texted or called, but neither of us took that step. Caleb Sterling's ingrained pride wouldn't let him beg someone who'd fled. And I, the current me, was no longer the naive 15-year-old. My family was bankrupt, and he was a god on a celestial throne. Unreachable. Our 7-year-old love affair had faded. Now, Caleb Sterling detested sycophants. If my family hadn't gone bankrupt, I would have confidently walked up and thrown my arm around him. But my current status made any approach look like I was after his money. I feared the awkwardness. I had abandoned him so callously. Yet he'd still stepped in to save the Hayes Corporation. Did Sterling Group really lack projects that badly? Or was Caleb Sterling just touched by my dad's beef jerky? My goldfish brain couldn't process it. I tossed and turned in bed. Just as I was having an internal debate, my phone buzzed violently, shattering the night's silence. An unknown number. Hello, who is this? This is Caleb Sterling. I froze for a solid 5 seconds. How did the Sterling Group's big boss get my number clearly? Sterling's intelligence network was no joke, I thought irritably, completely forgetting that my dear father had probably sold out his daughter's number. I cleared my throat, stammering. Mr. Sterling, why are you calling so late at night? From the other end of the line, his voice came, casual and clear. Gabby, is the first thing you do when you come back to Boston is play hide and seek with me? I choked, surprised the Sterling boss was being so direct. No, sir, I would never. On the other end, I heard the distinct click of a Zippo. He was smoking. I know what I'm about to say might alarm you, but Gabby, I'm out of patience for this slow burn. We're not 15 or 17 anymore. If I hesitate any longer, someone else will snatch you up. Let me be clear. My involvement with Hayes Corporation was to win your favor. Agreeing to tutor you, as your father requested, was merely an excuse for personal gain. My face flushed hot, as if I'd held it over a flame. What did the Sterling heir's words mean? Was he hitting on me? A flutter of excitement ran through me. Caleb Sterling spoke, his voice clear and measured. Don't overthink it. I am, in fact, interested in you. My face turned crimson, my heart pounding like a sewing machine. This was utterly absurd. When did 4-year-old Caleb Sterling become a straightforward, domineering alpha male? Right now, I felt nothing but shame and trepidation toward him. In my dazed state, I blurted out my confusion, hearing my panicked voice. Caleb Sterling's tone softened, melting. I won't pressure you into anything you don't want. I won't force you to answer right away. I just want you to know, Gabby, don't be afraid of me, no matter how much time passes, decades or even a century. I will be the only person in this world who will never hurt you. The night wind carried his voice to my ears. Anything you need, I can lay it at your feet. Don't worry about a thing. Gabby, just lean on me. I held my phone, listening to my heart pound in the silent night. Who wouldn't be swept off their feet by a confession like this from a powerful CEO? Suddenly, Caleb Sterling asked, "Do you want to come down and meet me? I'm right next door." I blinked in surprise. The two houses were practically adjacent. My balcony looked directly onto his. I threw off the covers, rushed to the balcony, and immediately saw his tall figure on the other side. He was so close. I felt like I could reach out and touch him. We were practically next door, and he was still calling me on the phone. For some reason, his familiar, almost pleading tone banished my hesitation and fear. Caleb Sterling must have just showered. He was wearing a thin silk robe, the belt loosely tied. Drops of water clung to his damp hair, dripping onto his straight nose, down his sculpted throat, and over his impressively chiseled abs. My eyes were glued to him. Oh my God. Caleb Sterling's physique was even more captivating than the heroes in romance novels. And in this cold wind, wasn't he afraid of catching a cold showing off his abs? Was I imagining it? Or was the neckline of his robe opening wider and wider? At a very convenient angle for me to admire, I swallowed hard. My rational mind screamed at me to look away, but my pupils were superglued to the glimpses of his chest. Caleb Sterling caught my appreciative gaze. He let out a low chuckle, his voice husky and teasing. "Seen enough. Want to come down? I'll come down," I blurted out. My shameless mouth almost spoke the words. "Yes, please come down," but reason slapped me awake. I gritted my teeth, regretting my hasty words. It's too late. And we're not related by blood. What if I can't control myself and touch you? Caleb Sterling looked as if he'd struck gold, his dark eyes shining, fixed on me. The next second, his earlobes turned bright red, as if he'd just made a heroic sacrifice for a touch. A touch. I gaped, unable to believe it. Was this the legendary Caleb Sterling, the cold demon of Boston, trying to seduce me? I bit my lip. I wouldn't even touch him if he offered. I wasn't some woman obsessed with good looks. With as much dignity as I could muster, I declined. His face fell, a look of utter disappointment, like a sad puppy whose owner had just thrown away its bone. His voice, tinged with complaint, said, "Well, if you ever want to touch, just call me. I'm available 247 for you." Afraid my hormones would take over, I couldn't look at him anymore. I tossed back. Go to bed. Mr. Sterling, I'm going to sleep too. And then ran into my room, slamming the door shut. I thought I'd be up all night after that shocking confession, but as soon as I lay down, I slept like a log until morning. The next morning, all the Hayes Corporation employees, the few loyal ones like Leo and Ted, lined up, waiting for Caleb Sterling to grace them with his presence. Our company was practically bankrupt, with salaries long overdue. I wore a neatly pressed business suit, standing beside my dad at the forefront. Caleb Sterling led a delegation of Sterling Group's finest. Walking in against the light, he stood tall and straight, his expensive black suit accentuating his perfect proportions. This was the first time I'd witnessed the legendary demon firsthand. As he crossed the threshold, a Sterling Group executive, dripping with sweat, rushed to catch up. Presenting a report, Caleb Sterling didn't even break stride. He glanced at the document and tossed it straight onto the floor. His voice was so cold it could freeze the air. Are you using your knees to think? If this contract isn't sorted by this afternoon, you can submit your resignation now. The executive trembled, his face ashen, and groveled, picking up the papers before retreating. The entire Hayes Corporation lobby was silent, everyone collectively holding their breath. I stood frozen, my heart pounding. So this was the real Caleb Sterling, a ruthless king who tolerated no mistakes. Yet, the moment his gaze met mine, all the sharpness and cruelty around him vanished like snow in the sun. He extended his hand towards me, a patient smile gracing his lips. I took a deep breath, plastered on a professional smile, and shook his hand. Welcome, Mr. Sterling. Your presence has truly illuminated our humble company. Hayes Corporation. Caleb Sterling paused slightly, his eyes widening in surprise. But when he met my warning glance, he immediately retracted his patronizing smile and switched to his professional, cold, domineering persona. I subtly hid my sweaty palm and turned away, beginning my presentation on the Hayes Corporation's technology project. It was the biggest responsibility I'd ever taken on. Behind me, the sharp eyes of Sterling Group's elite management team were fixed on me. Caleb Sterling's people were all brilliant prodigies. I couldn't afford to stumble over a single word, terrified of embarrassing Hayes Corporation and jeopardizing this life-saving deal. However, even though I'd rehearsed it perfectly, a slight tremor in my voice betrayed me. But not a single Sterling Group member displayed arrogance or rolled their eyes in disdain. On the contrary, when I faltered on a technical point, they enthusiastically offered suggestions and solutions, providing even better alternatives. I secretly thought, it must be because our boss was listening intently, chin resting on his hand. If the boss valued the project, his subordinates wouldn't dare to be disrespectful. As my presentation concluded, Caleb Sterling was the first to tap his fingers on the table, setting the rhythm of applause. His gaze was fixed on me, openly admiring. Excellent, Ms. Hayes. You are truly a prodigy. You've exceeded my expectations. I was stunned. He called me Mivs. Hayes. Not Gabby. This formal address brought me complete respect in front of his subordinates. Mr. Sterling, you're too kind. You flatter me, I replied humbly. But I struggled to keep my lips from stretching into a grin. You see, I'm the type who gets a little sunshine and my tail starts wagging all the way to the sky. Seeing my attempt to suppress a smile, Caleb Sterling's lips curved slightly. He leaned back lazily in his chair, tapping his fingers rhythmically on the table. His deep voice resonated. There's a large-scale public bidding project in the city next year. Among the competitors is a very familiar name, Sunstone Corporation. The moment the words Sunstone Corporation were spoken, everyone from Hayes Corporation froze. It was no coincidence. The catastrophic failure of Hayes Corporation was entirely thanks to the insidious backstabbing of those scum from Sunstone. But we were powerless. Left with nothing but bitter resentment, Caleb Sterling's gaze remained fixed on my face. He rose confidently, and, amidst a sea of eyes, walked slowly to stand directly in front of me. Our eyes met, his gaze burning like a flame. "Mr. Sterling, please instruct me." Caleb Sterling's lips curved upward. Perhaps he didn't realize how tender he sounded at that moment. "Do you want to witness Sunstone Corporation's downfall? Do you want to propel Hayes Corporation to the stars and wipe the smug look off their faces?" I stared blankly for 3 seconds. Then my eyes lit up like car headlights. I nodded vigorously, my voice brimming with combativeness. "Yes, I really want to." Caleb Sterling let out an evil laugh, leaning down slightly to meet my gaze, and whispered, "Pack your bags. I'll personally teach you how to destroy them." In that moment, a drop of sweet candy seemed to fall into my heart. Fizzing and bubbling, I gazed at him, stunned. Caleb Sterling, radiating a blinding aura, was the legendary demon that made one want to kneel and follow him. Was this the charm of a king? Oh my God. This fatal allure was a bit too much. The Sterling Group employees sitting behind us had already turned to stone. They stared at their boss, who was notorious for being gruff and irritable. Now, speaking to a business partner in a tone usually reserved for coaxing children. No wonder he'd tossed aside a dozen billion-dollar contracts to sneak into this rundown Hayes Corporation. At first, they hadn't understood what their boss had been drinking. Now, they understood. Their boss was trying to woo a woman. The bidding project quickly gained momentum. I was taken directly to Sterling Group's headquarters by Caleb Sterling for special training. He personally guided me, teaching me all the dark magic needed to take down Sunstone Corporation, from the day I arrived with my laptop. He had his staff demolish and rebuild the entire chairman's office. That stark black and white office, reminiscent of a funeral, was suddenly adorned with a plush pink sofa and an entire bar stocked with snacks and bubble tea. Just for me. Whenever senior managers came in to report, they'd tiptoe and cast furtive glances at me, their eyes darting around me 1,000 times. They were curious about which divine being had caused their 1,000-year-old ancient tree to suddenly bloom, because, ever since their guardian spirit, had settled into the sofa. The boss had never slammed his desk or scolded anyone. The scene of him tossing reports at employees and yelling, "Go back and redo it," was no longer happening. Lately, Caleb Sterling, even when his subordinates made foolish mistakes, would offer a benevolent smile, pat their shoulders, and say, "You've worked hard. Just make a few adjustments." Although that smile didn't reach his eyes, carrying the menacing aura of a tiger playing the role of a gentle lamb, it was enough to immerse Sterling Group in the warmth of spring. The employees treated me like an empress dowager, praying daily that I wouldn't fall ill and take a day off. Honestly, entering the tiger's den at first, I was terrified. The whispers in the streets claimed Caleb Sterling devoured his subordinates alive. But to my surprise, as a teacher, he was incredibly patient and meticulously thoughtful. Working with Caleb Sterling, I didn't need to use my brain to worry about meals or travel. He knew my preferences like the back of his hand. He had an incredible macro vision and a razor-sharp mind, helping me evolve at lightning speed every day. But the business world is never smooth sailing. As the bidding deadline approached, a traitor emerged from within Hayes Corporation. A crucial piece of core project data was leaked and sold to Sunstone Corporation. They brazenly plagiarized and announced it to the media. When I heard the news, I nearly collapsed. Tears welling up, my hands trembling as I held the documents. All my hard work, all those sleepless nights, felt like they'd gone down the drain. Caleb Sterling pushed the door open and walked in. Seeing my panic, He didn't offer platitudes or send someone to fix it for me. He pulled up a chair, sat opposite me, poured me a glass of warm water, and tapped his fingers on the table, jolting me to alertness. Crying is useless. Look closely at the data Sunstone just stole. They only got the surface. They don't understand the core algorithm. Gabby, you created it. Do you see their fatal flaw? I froze, stopped crying, and stared at the numbers on the screen. Indeed, that algorithm, without the final encryption key I held, would cause the entire system to crash during actual testing. My eyes lit up. Caleb Sterling smirked, his eyes sharp as knives. See, we don't need to fix it. Let them use that copied version for the bid. Now you know how to set a trap for them to dig their own graves? Don't you? Thanks to his calm guidance, I not only resolved the crisis, but also turned Sunstone's dirty trick into a tool for their own destruction. Caleb Sterling never solved my problems for me. Instead, he taught me how to dissect my own troubles. When I slumped over my desk in despair or felt inadequate due to my own perceived weakness, he would always soothe me, stabilize my emotions, and guide me to make the most lethal decisions. He was truly training me to become a formidable woman. Standing above all others, Caleb Sterling indulged my ambition, lifting me up towards the sky. The maturity, composure, and charm of a fully developed man had completely erased the image of the gloomy, psychologically troubled teenager from years ago. Faced with such an extraordinary man, how could I not be moved? He approached me in the most respectful way, never making me feel awkward. Throughout our training, Caleb Sterling maintained impeccable emotional control, as steadfast as bedrock, leaving me, the one involved, in a constant state of confusion, wondering if he was mentoring a business partner or a future spouse. The bidding war concluded, and as the announcement date neared, Sunstone Corporation indeed received a bitter blow when their system completely crashed in the middle of the auditorium. The sense of emptiness in my heart grew larger. After defeating Sunstone, would he and I return to square one? The more I clung to the moment, the faster time flew. I had grown my wings the moment the MC announced Hayes Corporation as the winner. All my employees hugged and cried. Lausia, my father, was the most jubilant. He walked straight up to the Sunstone Corporation's leadership team, clapping them heartily on the face and exclaiming, "Haha, my daughter. See, she's my own flesh and blood." But amidst the chaotic cheers, I looked up at the observation deck and caught a fleeting glimpse of loss in Caleb Sterling's eyes as he smiled proudly at me. My heart ached. Didn't he want to part with me either? It felt like we were just a spark away from igniting. But we always lacked the courage to cross the line. My nature was to hesitate, often saying later and missing opportunities. I thought I'd be as cowardly and retreat as I was at 15. But then an uninvited guest suddenly appeared, disrupting the game. A elegantly dressed lady, exuding an aura of wealth, sought me out in a private tea room. She removed her sunglasses, took a sip of tea, and assessed me from head to toe with a cool gaze. "Hello? Dear, you're Caleb Sterling's mother." I froze. Was the melodramatic scenario of me taking $10 billion and leaving her son about to unfold? My parents were drowning in debt. I probably needed to ask for at least $100 billion to make it worthwhile. Regaining her composure, she tapped her diamond-ringed finger on the table. "Miss Hayes, the Sterling family doesn't lack the money to support a project, but don't let it interfere with it. Lately, he's been staying up all night, working himself to death. I need you to convince him to stop overworking. Otherwise..." The anger within me flared. I looked directly into her eyes and interrupted sharply. "What kind of mother are you? Your son is working himself to death. And instead of taking care of him yourself, you come here to dictate to me with a condescending attitude. Are you afraid he'll collapse? Or are you afraid your position as Mrs. Sterling will be threatened?" My words hit their mark, cracking her facade of arrogance. She stared, then suddenly pulled out a tissue and began to sob. These weren't tears of maternal love, but tremors of extreme panic. She threw caution to the wind and grasped my hand. "Yes, you're right. If he collapses, this Sterling family will fall apart. The patriarch and the shareholders will tear the company apart. My title as chairman's wife will vanish. Miss Hayes, please save this family. He looks strong, but his body is already broken. He's risking his life. You are the only one he listens to. Please save him. As the last rays of the setting sun painted the sky red, I sat in stunned silence, replaying the 7 years of Caleb Sterling's profound darkness. Since I'd left, the 17-year-old orphan had thrown himself into the treacherous mire of his family, declaring war for inheritance against numerous powerful figures. At 18, he'd worked himself to the bone, catching the patriarch's eye. At 19, he was kidnapped by rivals, locked in a dark basement for a month, and beaten. When he was rescued, he spat out blood, sneered, and vowed to uproot every obstacle. At 20, he entered the Sterling Group board of directors amidst relentless pressure, stepping over the bodies of his enemies to ascend to the throne at lightning speed. At 22, when his own parents tried to exploit him, he stripped them of all power, pushing them to the fringes, but keeping their token chairman title as a reward for their past. At 23, Caleb Sterling's swift maneuvers purged rebellious branches, propelling Sterling Group onto the global stage. By 24, with Sterling Group solid as Mount Tai and ruling Boston, he collapsed from exhaustion and was rushed to the emergency room. His mother, the woman sitting before me, wept, fearing the loss of her cash cow. Caleb Sterling, then delirious with a high fever, weakly tried to rip out his IV drip. He'd mumbled like a madman, saying he had to climb higher. Only when he stood at the apex of the pyramid would he have enough power to lift the ruined Hayes Corporation from the mud. Only then, he believed, would his Gabby look at him again and not abandon him like she did before. I sat there like a stone statue, my heart pounded by a relentless sledgehammer, hurting so much I could barely breathe. The elegantly dressed woman before me, who had given birth to him but never fulfilled her maternal duties, was now shedding tears, begging out of fear of losing her comfortable lifestyle. I felt disgusted by her selfishness, but my throat tightened with pity for that man. My Caleb Sterling, the powerful 4-year-old god, had spent 7 years wading through blood, climbing out of hell on his own, and reborn in darkness. He had spent his entire youth running 99 steps towards me. So, for this last step, even if I had to walk barefoot on broken glass, I would walk towards him. In that instant, as the last ray of light faded, I bolted from the tea room and dialed a number. A rustling sound came from the other end, followed by a deep, cautious male voice, tinged with humility. "You're looking for me." I bit my lip, suppressing the stinging in my nose. Took a deep breath, my voice trembling but clear. "Caleb Sterling, I'm not calling you Rain Brother anymore. I want to be your exception." 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Silence. Then, a broken sob from the other end. It was the sound of surprise, of burning hope, of a man who had wandered a desert for 7 years, finally finding an oasis. I hung up and hailed a taxi. Rushing to the mansion, dusk had fallen, and the night wind whipped my hair. I ran across the yard, pounding on his door frantically. The door flew open. Caleb Sterling stood there, his face pale from exhaustion, a bandage on the back of his hand covering an IV site, but his dark eyes blazed with fire, hot and wild, as if they could consume everything. Without a word, he reached out his long, strong arms, pulled me into his embrace, and held me so tightly I thought my ribs would break. The scent of cedar wood mixed with a faint hint of tobacco enveloped me. He buried his head in my neck, his voice choked and hoarse. "I caught you. This time, I won't let go, even if I die." I wrapped my arms around his broad, slightly trembling back, feeling the rapid beat of his heart against my chest. His voice was weak, carrying a humility he only dared to show me. Van, I'm so tired after these 7 years. Please don't go anymore." My heart ached with every beat. I looked up into his red-rimmed eyes and reached out to caress his gaunt but still beautiful face. "I'm not going anywhere," I said firmly, then stood on my tiptoes and initiated a deep kiss on his cold lips. Caleb Sterling, I will protect you for the rest of my life. He held me for a moment, then quickly took control, pulling me closer, kissing me back with a frantic, reverent passion, as if touching the only faith in his life. The following month, Caleb Sterling and I had a whirlwind engagement. The news of the union between the powerhouse Sterling Group and the Hayes Corporation sent shockwaves through Boston's media. The extravagant engagement party concluded. And while the guests were still enthusiastically celebrating in the ballroom, in Caleb Sterling's private suite, I was already being scooped up onto his lap, pinned to the sofa, my toes curled with nervousness. His dark eyes were bloodshot, filled with a mischievous glint as he began to settle old scores for my games of evasion when I first returned. He lightly bit my earlobe, his husky voice sending heat down my spine. Speak. Why did you pretend not to know me that day? His wandering hand teased my flushed cheek, then slid lower, sending shivers down my spine. I was wrong, I gasped, my mind a jumble. He increased the pressure of his fingers. Now I was deafened and speechless, barely able to hear him mumbling anything, only trembling uncontrollably. My fingernails unintentionally raked red marks across Caleb Sterling's broad back. It was clearly painful, yet his face was filled with a seductive pleasure. He tilted his head back and gently patted my back, coaxing, "Relax, my darling. Hold me so tight. I can't breathe. Say you love me first." I trembled again, my nails digging deeper. The air in the room was thick with unspoken desire. The love suppressed for 7 years was finally released through this playful chase. The secret love of my youth was a priceless diary of a shy person who only dared to approach the one they liked by tiptoeing, walking as if on thin ice. But time was the greatest weapon. It granted humans courage. Love, which had dwelled in the shadows, finally stepped bravely into the light. There was no need to hide anymore. The words "I love you" were a secret I had to keep for 7 long years before I could finally utter them. Our youthful love, passionate and innocent, like the chirping of summer cicadas, cried out to the whole world that love never dies. It only needs perseverance. Patience and hardship leads to sweetness. Except for Caleb Sterling. Outsiders always called me the Sterling heir. They didn't know that dazzling title was built on a marriage steeped in money and a soul-crushing decay. My parents each had their own lovers outside, and I was merely an ornament for them to display to the media, perfectly enacting the drama of a model family. When the door closed, what always awaited me was a dark, cold storage room, their disgusted gazes, and the carefully concealed bruises from beatings hidden beneath designer clothes. I grew up in the darkness, wearing cruelty and hatred as armor. I convinced myself I was a foul monster in the mud, never seeking light, and certainly not worthy of anyone's love. Until I was 14. When Gabby's family moved in next door, that house was always brightly lit and filled with laughter. That warm light, like a rogue beam, pierced through the thick curtains and entered my dark room. The first time I saw Gabby, she had eyes as clear as a spring and a radiant smile that captured my attention. I was envious, yet desperately yearning. And then one evening, she stood shyly on my doorstep, at her tiny, soft hand, carefully reaching out to grasp my freezing fingers. "Mr. Sterling, my mom said it's getting dark and you're home alone. This big house must be scary. Come over for dinner. You won't be afraid anymore." My heart felt like it was being squeezed. In my 14 years of life, I had endured unimaginable cruelty. This was the first time someone feared I was lonely, feared the darkness would consume me. That small hand pulled the monster that was me out of the gates of hell. As I entered their house, I immediately saw through the calculation hidden in Gabby's parents' eyes. In this wealthy neighborhood, there were plenty of people who wanted to ride the coattails of the Sterling family's young master. Normally, I would have scoffed and turned away, because I was just a useless burden bearing the Sterling name, unable to bring them any profit. But the warmth from Gabby's hand made me feel pathetic. I was afraid she would be taken away, so I lied. I fabricated a story about being a cherished heir, making them fantasize that by keeping Gabby by my side, their family would change their fortunes. Through that lie, I tricked myself into 3 years of being near the light of my life. I cherished her more than my own life. If Gabby didn't smile, I'd practice smiling in front of the mirror until my facial muscles ached. Gabby feared my cold tone. I forced myself to use the gentlest voice to call her name. I used every means to protect her from bullying outside. I just hoped this stolen moment of happiness could last forever. But fate never favors those who lie. On the evening of my 17th birthday, I received the first birthday cake of my life. Gabby brought a lopsided tiramisu, her face smudged with flour. She urged me to close my eyes and make a wish. Under the flickering candlelight, I stared at her, afraid to close my eyes. I was afraid that if I blinked, this beautiful illusion would vanish. My plea was a tiny one. Will I get to eat your cake again next year? She proudly promised to bake me cakes for the rest of my life. But the day of departure arrived, like a knife slicing through all hope. The lie was revealed. Gabby's parents realized I was worthless. They decisively moved to Portland, taking my very lifeblood with them, standing on the balcony, watching the moving truck disappear. I felt a hatred for my own weakness and incompetence to the bone. My light was gone. If I had truly seized control of Sterling Group, if I had possessed the ultimate power they craved, would she have ever been taken away from me? My heart roared in despair. Gabby had inadvertently taught a monster how to love and then abandoned it in a cruel reality. But I didn't blame you. I only hated myself for not being strong enough. The next 7 years were spent drowning myself in the bloody sea of commerce. I trampled over every obstacle, madly biting and tearing at those who stood in my way, desperately gasping for breath to climb to the highest peak of power. For 7 long years, I celebrated 7 birthdays alone in a dark room. Every night, I lit a single candle. I stared at the flame with wide open eyes, cherishing a shadow etched deep within my heart, repeating a single name, Gabby, Gabby, Gabby.